welcome at Shadow at Night. It's Tuesday, December the 10th, 2024. And on the show tonight, I think, and this blew my mind completely because I didn't even know this happened on the weekend. I read a headline from the left-wing corporate media that said, oh my God, Jamil Jivani, the relatively new conservative MP for Oshawa, I think, was meeting with J.D. Vance, the vice president-elect of the United States, this past weekend, and they seemed like they were up in arms about it, like the conservatives were trying to negotiate and wheel and deal on behalf of Canada behind Trudeau's back. That's what the left-wing corporate media made it seem like, when in reality, Jivani and Vance go back to their college days. They've known each other for years, and they were just catching up at a conference this past weekend in Washington, D.C., called the IDU Forum. This is, let's see, the Democratic Union, the International Democratic Union Forum. And all of these conservative leaders from all across the world got together there this past weekend, including Pierre Poilievre and the brand new conservative leader of the UK. Her name is Kemi, I want to say this right now, Kemi Badenoch. Born and raised in Nigeria, moved to the UK when she was 16 years old. So I wanted to know more about this Kemi because, let's be honest, the UK, for as much as we kind of go, whatever, is still the sixth largest economy in the world and the sixth largest military power in the world. And they have nuclear weapons, nuclear capability. So they are not to be laughed at. They are not to be dismissed out of hand. And right now they're being run by Marxists. So anyway, Badenoch and Poilievre had this interesting conversation this past weekend in Washington. We've got some of it for you, a play in just a couple of minutes. And also, Kemi gave a speech in front of all of these people, all of these conservative world leaders, either elected or opposition, 24 minutes long. And I watched this video this afternoon a couple of times, and I thought, I've got to put that on the show tonight. I can't not put that on the show, but I can't put a 24-minute discussion. It's not even a discussion. It's a monologue. It's a speech. I can't put that on the show. It's too long. People get bored. But then I thought to myself, were you bored? No, you listened to it twice. She's really good. She gets it. She's a politician who speaks our language, at least so it seems. So I want to put this out to you guys tonight to see what you think. So yes, it might seem lazy of me. Shadow's putting on a 24-minute speech so we could just sit there and do nothing. No, that's not the case at all. I want you guys to watch this, and I want to hear what you have to say about it, because I was really impressed with her. You don't hear politicians talking like this. Usually they guard themselves very, very much when it comes to public speaking. And maybe it's because she was in a room filled with other conservatives. She felt like she could let loose a little bit. But look, man, what a great speech. And she's speaking our language. So yeah, we're going to play that speech, and I want to see what you guys have to say about it. The Shadow at Night live stream, as always, is brought to you by CanadaNanoSilver.com.
Crest toothpaste to SilverSuticals toothpaste. First, we're starting out with Crest. It's a classic. It's an original. It's what I've used most of my life. But that being said, it does have its problems. First off, the consistency is so weird and thick, and I get it's a paste, but it really doesn't spread that well. And I must also say that I'm not in love with the taste. I get toothpaste isn't supposed to taste good, but why shouldn't it? But that being said, it does get the job done. Next, we have SilverSuticals. They have 3 flavors, but today we're going with Bubbleberry. And already it smells so good. So I'm excited to see what this tastes like. The consistency is also a lot smoother, and I must say it spreads way nicer in your mouth.
This literally tastes like fruit bubblegum.
Yeah, this toothpaste was pretty good. I actually went in for seconds, and it's infused with nano silver, so it helps remineralize your teeth and keep them fresh throughout the day.
100% go with SilverSuticals.
And here's the results. What's your favorite toothpaste?
CanadaNanoSilver.com. Engage your health now. That's Kevin and Anna from Canada Nano Silver. And the phone number you see right there, 204-808-9292. You can also reach them through the email tab on the website. Again, that is CanadaNanoSilver.com. Hello to Edna watching in Victoria. Michelle is watching. Michelle wants to know, what is this music called, or where is it from? The music that I play at the very beginning while you guys are waiting, or the intro music? There's two different songs. You need to be more specific. But they're both mine. I can't share them with you. I wish I could, but I can't. I promised. Hello, Christine, watching in Enola. Ted is watching tonight from the Democratic People's Republic of Kazakhstan, Hunger Games, Pacific District. I love you guys. I mean, I feel like I'm getting together with family every single night at 8 o'clock Central. I love this. Judy is watching tonight. Hello, Judy. Darren from Killarney. Jason's watching tonight from the backwoods somewhere. Greg's in Kingston. Mitch is watching in Earlton, Ontario. Lori is watching tonight. Karen's in Temiskaming, Quebec. I hope I said that right. In Tabor, Debbie is watching tonight. Sheila's watching in Oshawa. Tom is watching in Sask. Luella's watching from Red Deer. Wherever you're watching tonight, don't forget to like and share. Get this out to as many people as you possibly can. I've added a new platform tonight. Well, it's not really new. I usually broadcast this show on Facebook, my Facebook page, not my profile. Tonight, I'm on both the Facebook page, The Shadow Davis Show, and The Shadow Davis Facebook profile. For people who may not have seen the show in a couple of years, but they are still friends of mine on Facebook, maybe they'll catch it tonight. You may see some names you haven't seen in the chat tonight, or names you've never seen in the chat tonight. And if you do, please welcome them. Give them a warm welcome. If they're rude, then let me know and I'll deal with them. Also, YouTube tonight. Say hello to our YouTube people. We're on Twitch, we're on X, we're on Telegram, we're on Rumble, and of course, the all access members who are watching on shadowdavis.com. I have some stuff for you guys tonight on the extension after 9 o'clock Central from Dr. Stephen Greer. Dr. Stephen Greer. Okay, I reached out to Dr. William Makis today, and the reason for that is he put this video up on his Substack this morning at about 11 o'clock. Watch. Interesting. There he is. Okay. There. Ooh.
There. Hi, everyone. Dr. Makis here. I have some breaking news. My family has been threatened again today by Alberta Health Services lawyers and Alberta Premier Danielle Smith's office. It's now I'm being threatened with regards to my podcast. I received indication recently that Alberta Premier Danielle Smith was going to double down on the attack on my family and that she was going to work very hard with Alberta Health Services lawyers to destroy my family in the next 3 months. Now, they wanted to do it in the next 2 months. They didn't get the court dates that they wanted. I think even the judges are starting to hesitate. The corrupt judges that have been involved in this over $100,000 extortion plot that they've been plotting against my family for several years now. But the indication from the United Conservative Party and Alberta Premier Danielle Smith's office is that they're going to come after my family. They're going to work very hard to destroy my family, but they're going to do it through a third party so she can maintain deniability that she has nothing to do with it. She's not interfering with anything, but in fact, the documents are from the Premier's office, and all the dirty work is going to be done by Alberta Health Services lawyers. So recent threats against my family today, I will actually be posting the documents of these threats. They've been filed in court. They're harassing the court. They're harassing the judges. They want me in prison as soon as possible. They got a court date in March. That's not good enough. So once again, my family's being threatened. I'm retaining legal counsel, and I'm going to start Give and Go as soon as possible so I can raise money for legal funds and defend my family, because folks, they want to finish me off, and they might go as far, Alberta Health Services might go as far as trying to have me killed. So I will keep you all up to date with what's going on with this latest development.
All right, there's Dr. Makis. I sent him a message today asking if he wanted to come on the show tonight, and I haven't heard back from him, at least not yet. Hang on, let me check now, see if there's a message there. I wouldn't think so if he's in fear for his family's life. No, there's nothing there. So I sent the message a little bit afternoon today, and nothing yet. So hopefully he will join the show and explain exactly what's going on. The last time we had him on, he talked about possibly being able to work with the Danielle Smith government. So I don't know. It's very interesting, isn't it? Don't forget to like and share, you guys. Get this out to as many people as you possibly can. Facebook, like and share on both the profile and the page. YouTube, it's a smash the like button. You know that. X, it's a reshare and a heart. What else? Rumble, there's a share button beneath the screen. You guys know the drill. Get it out there to as many people as you possibly can. You are the army that carries this message. Thank you very much for everything that you guys do to make sure that we get this out to as many people as we possibly can. Remember this from last week? This is Dr. Peter Hotez telling us that on January 21st, all hell's going to break loose when it comes to diseases. Watch that.
Here's the reason why we need to care about this stuff, Nicole, is that we have some big picture stuff coming down the pike starting on January 21st. Mr. Bloomberg mentioned H5N1. That I'm really worried about. It's all over wild birds on the western part of the United States and going up in the north. It's getting into the poultry. We're seeing sporadic human cases, no human-to-human transmission yet, but that could happen. It's in the cattle. It's in the milk. And that's just the beginning. We have another major coronavirus likely brewing in Asia. We've had SARS in 2002, SARS-2, COVID-19 in 2019. And we know these viruses are jumping from bats to people thousands of times a year. But there's still more. We know that we have a big problem with mosquito-transmitted viruses all along the Gulf Coast, where I am here in Texas. So we're expecting dengue and possibly Zika virus coming back, or a Puche virus, maybe even yellow fever. And there's more. Then we have all this sharp rise in vaccine preventable diseases going up because of, in part, the anti-vaccine activism that's so prominent right now. We have a fivefold rise in pertussis cases, whooping cough over the last year, 15 measles outbreaks this year. We've got polio that's been in the wastewater in New York State. All that's going to come crashing down on January 21st on the Trump administration. We need a really, really good team to be able to handle this.
Oh, I'm terrified. We should probably run for the hills right now. Last one out. Don't let the door hit you on your ass on the way. I just butchered that. Don't let the door hit you in the ass on the way out. I think that's the way it goes, right? Ow! He is trying to scare the pants off people. So Karen Kingston, our friend Karen, did a Substack today on the Kingston Report. I'm sure you follow it. If you don't, go and follow her. She puts out a lot of great information. I didn't mean to say "ert." I meant to say "it." And so Karen didn't really know if Hotez was just fear-mongering or if he actually knew something was afoot, because he's working with the big companies and all of the, the left-wing corporate media. So that's what her Substack was mostly about today. She's going to be joining the show next Wednesday night. We haven't had Karen on for a good long time, so it's going to be nice to see her again. Next Wednesday night, Karen Kingston is back on the Shadow at Night live stream. And Thursday night, Ted Kuntz from Vaccine Choice Canada joins the show. All right. So here is that big conservative international symposium that I was talking about just a couple of minutes ago from TNC.news. Global conservative politicians discuss policy and their shared values. So let's go ahead and scroll down a little bit. You see there's Jamil Javani with the conservative leader for the UK. Her name is Kemi Badenoch. And then, of course, the VP-elect of the United States, J.D. Vance. Conservative politicians from around the world, including Canada, the U.S., and the U.K., came together over the weekend to discuss shared economic and cultural values among the center-right parties, not extreme right. Let's make that completely clear. Aren't you sick of being called an extreme right-wing nut job yet? Because that's what the left-wing corporate media has made a habit of for the past 4 or 5 years. Conservative politicians from around the world, the Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre met the new leader of the UK Conservatives. Again, her name, Kemi Badenoch. posting a picture of the two Tory leaders on X. Poilievre said that Badenoch stands for common sense, freedom, and family, and that she's attempting to defeat toxic wokeism, and there they are there. Now, here is that conversation between the two of them. You got to listen closely to what they're talking about here. They're talking about Marxism by another name. Watch this.
Now have a scenario where I say all the liberal values are being hacked.
Yes.
And free protest, or the right to protest, is now used as a cover for intimidation. We're just protesting,
right.
But the way that the protests happen are not about just talking about your grievance, it's about making other people feel unsafe.
What does a bank robber do after he gets caught and convicted? He changes his name, has an alias.
Yeah.
When he's caught again, he changes his name again. So they were communists, they were Marxists, then that got found out, then they became communists, and then they became, oh no, we're not communists, we're socialists. And then they became democratic socialists. And once that was a nightmare, then they said, no, we're social democrats.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they ruined that word, then they said, well, we're going to steal a word that actually means exactly the opposite of what we are. We're going to call ourselves liberal.
We, as conservatives, have sort of sat back, have this whole laissez-faire, well, it's free speech and people should be allowed to do that. We should champion our values. We need to fight for them. And I think it's because we didn't, across the board, not just on the social and cultural, but on the economic, because we didn't fight for our values, we ended up just being unrecognizable, and that's why we lost. And my job now is to pick up my party, dust it off, and rebuild.
So I saw that this afternoon, and I went, oh, who is this woman? They're talking about Marxism by another name. Remember what Poilievre just said? Marxism didn't work, then they changed it to communism, then they went to socialism, then they went to democratic socialism. None of these things worked. Now they call themselves liberals when they are anything but liberal. So let's have a look at the website of this IDU forum. Here it is here, idu.org. Forum brings together policymakers, senior party officials, blah, blah, blah. The forum was this past weekend in Washington, D.C. The Bush-Thatcher Award for Freedom. That's something that gave me pause a little bit, you guys. And the reason for that is this speech that George H.W. Bush gave back in January of 1991.
What is at stake is more than one small country. It is a big idea, a new world order, where diverse nations are drawn together in common cause to achieve the universal aspirations of mankind: peace and security, freedom, and the rule of law.
Did he just say New World Order? Yes, of course he did. And apparently, he was one of those 33rd degree guys. He was high up there in the ranking of the Skull and Bones Society or whatever it's called. So that made me think, maybe he was fooling them all back then, and maybe these people are sincere. And so I looked up Kemi Badenoch, and I didn't realize that this past weekend she gave this speech, this 24-minute speech. And I thought, I got to watch this. And I watched it. And I went, this is incredible. Could she be the conservative savior of the world? Listen, this is 24 minutes, you guys. And once again, I don't want you to think I'm slacking off here. I just wanted you to hear this speech, and I want your thoughts on it as it's going on, and of course, when it's over. So here she is.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I joined the Conservative movement in a very unusual way. I didn't study politics or government at university. I'm not a lawyer. I'm an engineer. Thank you. I am an engineer. I analyze systems. I like to know how things work, and I love to fix things that are broken. I'm a child of the 80s. I was born in London, but I grew up in Lagos, Nigeria. Thank you, Roxy. Lagos was a place where almost everything seemed broken. I grew up under a military dictatorship, and I would never have believed that 40 years later, I would be standing here as the leader of the world's most successful political party in the history of Western democracy. And yet, I am here as leader now because my party suffered its greatest ever election defeat. We lost 2/3 of our members of parliament and polled at a historic low. I'm here to talk about why that happened and why it matters for all of you. I believe my party lost because it spent a lot of time talking right but governing left. We didn't recognize how the world was changing, and when we did not adapt enough. There was complacency about the nature of the enemy we were fighting because a lot of people did not recognize it. They didn't recognize it for what it was. There is a great movie from the 1990s. I'm sure many of you have seen it. It's called The Usual Suspects. And in it, there is a fantastic quote that the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he did not exist. That is the trick that our opponents on the left, whatever you want to call them, communists, socialists, in this country they call them liberals. I don't know why, there is nothing liberal about them. But there is a trick that they play, which is that they smuggle ideas and policies that look like liberalism, but are anything but. Liberalism has been hacked. Let me give you an example. The UK, like many countries, has generous laws to accommodate persecuted people who are seeking asylum. It was reported this year that 1 in 7 asylum seekers who were housed on a barge in southern England were converting to Christianity under the supervision of local church leaders. So I'm not religious myself, but I am and always will be the granddaughter of a Methodist reverend. And I know the joy that comes to priests every time their flocks grow and a sinner repenteth. But I found it shocking that not a single one of these conversions was treated with any suspicion until at the same time it was discovered that one convert was found to have committed multiple sexual offenses after arriving in the UK and then went on to carry out a chemical attack on a mother and her 2 young children. And it turned out that over many years, we have had very naive church leaders converting people who had no interest in Christianity as a means to circumvent border control. This is what I mean when I say that liberalism has been hacked. When a system that makes accommodations for the vulnerable is being exploited by opponents of that system, something needs to change. These aren't features of the system. They are bugs, and they need fixing. If conservatives and liberals try to manage migration with simplistic tests and no overall vision of what kind of country we are trying to create, we will fail, and the voters will punish us, as my party found out in July. There are many, many ways that liberalism is being hacked, both socially and economically. In January this year, Javier Milei gave a fantastic speech in Davos, of all places. But I must quote it, because it had very similar themes to a speech that I gave 2 years ago, which I'm hoping actually inspired him. And in his speech, he says, "It may sound ridiculous to suggest that the West has turned to socialism, but it's only ridiculous if you limit yourself to the traditional economic definition of socialism, which says that it's an economic system where the state owns the means of production. This definition should be updated in the light of current circumstances." And he goes on to say that today states don't need to control the means of production to control every aspect of the lives of individuals. With tools such as printing money, debt, subsidies, controlling the interest rate, price controls, and regulations to correct market failures, the state can control the lives and fates of millions of individuals. He is absolutely right. 2 years ago, when I gave that speech about how so many leftist ideologies have snuck into institutions across the Western world wearing the clothes of the civil rights movement, but they are not about civil rights. So many people don't know what freedom really is because they've always had it. They have no idea just how lucky they are and just how fragile freedom can be. They don't know how easily freedom can be taken away, or in some cases, given away.
No, Michael, no. She mentioned Davos in a negative way. She said Davos of all places. That's where Javier Milei gave the speech. So she's not praising Davos at all. My red flag so far, she says she's not religious, but that probably makes me a nitpicker. Anyway, let's continue.
I was lucky in my experiences. I was born to a relatively wealthy family and had a decent education. But I also know what it is like to be poor. I watched my family become poor as their wealth, income, and savings were inflated away by destructive government policies. But they didn't call it socialism, but it definitely was. Capital controls, no freedom of movement, government owning the means of production. And there was no freedom either. The government decided which school your child went to, it decided which businesses could or could not operate, all the way to arrests with no trial and state-sanctioned murder. So I know what freedom looks like. It's what I had in the UK. I know the values that can make citizens wealthier and happier, and how without them, they become engines of misery and despair. Classic liberal values, not left-wing liberalism, but classic liberalism of free markets, free speech, free enterprise, freedom of religion, the presumption of innocence and trusted institutions within the rule of law, and equality under the law, no matter who you are or where you come from. All of those things were missing when I was growing up as a child. So I know their value, and I know that in the West, we may be losing what made our countries great. All of us here are custodians of a great tradition, a tradition that is under threat. We all have something in common, whether you identify as a conservative or as a classic liberal, all of us on the centre-right share these values, and we are dealing with the same problem, and that is that those values have been hacked, they have been undermined. But if we can spot the trick, we can stop it from destroying our societies. We are giving away freedoms away by stealth because we don't know that value, and we are not adapting. Ideologies and beliefs that demand our tolerance, even as they seek to undermine the very culture and institutions that create that tolerance. It is the question all of us in politics today must answer. How do liberal democracies, which are so tolerant and so accepting, fight against the intolerance of those it has accepted, of different norms, customs, and values which are accommodated within the liberal framework, but which seek to undermine it at every level? I started my speech by explaining that I joined the Conservative movement in an unusual way. It started when I moved back to the UK from Nigeria, age 16.
Now, she's going to tell us a little bit about herself because she was only just elected leader of the party last month. So we need to know who she is, right? And again, in case you're just tuning in now, this is the brand new leader of the Conservative Party of the United Kingdom. As she put it, the most successful political party in history. They've been around the longest. Her name is Kemi Badenoch. Let's continue.
My parents were doctors. They wanted me to be doctors just like them. So I got to London and got a job at McDonald's. And then I started off part-time at a local college where I told them what my ambitions were. And it was the first time in my entire life that a teacher told me, a straight-A student, that my ambitions were too high. She asked me if I was sure I wanted to be a doctor. It would be much easier if I became a nurse. And I realize now that she was trying to be helpful. In her own misguided way, she thought that black kids were not very academic. She wanted me to aim low and succeed rather than aim high and fail. And you all know that if a teacher tells a 16-year-old their grades aren't that important, they won't work as hard. I didn't know how to describe what was happening at the time, but I knew I didn't like it. Today, I call it the bigotry of low expectations. It does not believe in meritocracy, and it seeded in me a hatred of affirmative action policies that are designed in theory to help minorities, but in reality hold them back and cast doubt on their real achievements. The truth is that the left are not that interested in ethnic minorities, except as a tool to fight their battles against the right. In fact, just this morning, the British Prime Minister, the Labour Prime Minister, made a joke about how I worked at McDonald's. He would never have dared to do that if I was a left-wing activist. And if a Conservative Prime Minister had made those comments about a black party leader, they would have been called a racist and asked to resign. Even as a teenager, I could see the hypocrisy in so much of their rhetoric. I knew that these were not my kind of people, and so I started taking an interest in conservatism and happened upon the books of Thomas Sowell, and the rest, as they say, is history. Growing up in a place where everyone looked like me inoculated me against the fashionable and nonsensical notion of white privilege, or that oppression was primarily related to skin color. Oppression narratives are the new cloak for socialism to smuggle itself into institutions, pretending to be civil rights, pretending to be social justice. These are the new battle lines, and I'm here to tell you how to fight them. In the UK, I'm criticized as a culture warrior. It is meant to be pejorative, but I love the title the left-wing media give me. My grandfather told me that I was descended from warriors, and so I think I'm keeping up with tradition. I believe in tradition, and if we don't defend our culture, who will? So how does liberalism get hacked, and how do we fight it? Let's start with an example. We all believe in freedom. None of us want our country to be invaded. So, of course, we are against imperialism. Suddenly, a group turns up. They want to promote anti-imperialism. It sounds okay. The government gives them money. They get university grants, they write textbooks, and they bring those narratives into the school curriculum. And suddenly you find that anti-imperialism is directed solely against our own country, or the West. They're not attacking China. They're not attacking Russia. In fact, in some instances, they praise Russia, which is actively carrying out an imperialist agenda against Ukraine. Here's another example, the anti-racism movement. We are all against racism. So a group turns up and says that they are anti-racist. It sounds okay. And then all of a sudden, we see that they've decided that all white people are racist. And so the only way to be anti-racist is to be against white people because of their white privilege. This is nonsense. And it happens over and over and over again. We all care about our environment. We are conservatives. Conservative parties, by their very nature, are almost rooted in rural communities, the original parties of the land, dedicated to leaving a better world for our children. And for many years, Conservatives happily worked with all parties to protect the natural world, to repair it where needed, to make it more beautiful, and to tread carefully in how we used its riches. Yet, just as in so many policy areas, these values were hacked, replaced by a radical green absolutism. Looking after our planet became an exclusive discussion about net zero and reducing emissions, and alongside it, the growth of activist governments to regulate it. Even feminism, that was meant to promote the rights of women, has spent so much time diving into postmodernism and deconstructing the dialectic, it doesn't know what a woman is anymore. But harm is caused. That movement doesn't know what a woman is to the extent that in Scotland they were putting rapists in women's prisons simply because the men declared themselves women. This is how liberalism gets hacked. We talk about free speech, and then our enemies use it to feed self-loathing propaganda to our children on social media. We talk about freedom of religion, only to see those that do not want freedom use their religion and use their rights to take away the freedoms of others, as we saw just last week in the UK Parliament when a Labour MP effectively demanded blasphemy laws. The presumption of innocence is thrown away and replaced with cancel culture, masquerading as justice. The right to protest is used as a cover to carry out intimidation, most recently, as we've seen in cities across the world, of Jews. Posters of missing children and kidnapped hostages are ripped down, denying the freedom of others to be heard. Our history, read through the most hostile and negative interpretations, taught to children and widely propagated on our own media. These problems are not just national, they are international. The European Convention of Human Rights is now interpreted well beyond the intentions of its creators, to a point where nations can no longer arbitrate fairly between citizens. Motions at the UN that would never pass now do so regularly because of the moral cowardice of those who should know better. We turn up at international conferences, and other countries are demanding reparations to the tune of trillions of dollars for historical injustices, as we saw at the Commonwealth Conference earlier this year. Every country in the world can claim that it deserves reparations from another one. This is not serious foreign policy. And I remember when talks of reparations were a fringe discussion, but the movements are springing up and they will become mainstream because their proponents sense a weakness in the West and in those who are meant to defend and champion Western values. I don't like using the word woke to describe these issues. I use progressive authoritarianism because the word woke masks just how deeply destructive these ideologies are. But for some reason, progressive authoritarianism is not catching on. I don't know why. So how do we fix this? We need muscular liberalism and muscular conservatism. We don't want to throw away any of the things that are good about our society, but we need to police the boundaries, otherwise our opponents will blur them to the point where they no longer exist. And the first step is to explain the value of liberty. Our opponents have no fundamental concept of the meaning of liberty. They see it as freedom to do bad things. Whether they are offensive or exploitative, that's all they think about. Liberty is a practical necessity for a flourishing society. It is not just a philosophical nice to have. The second thing we have to do is to stop the expansion of the state. A common mistake is to accept that every problem requires the state to get involved, and this reinforces that belief that state action can solve everything when it cannot. The more state power grows, the more we curtail what people can and should do for themselves. Worse, we reduce people's ability to think for themselves. And this is why I'm so excited about DOGE and what President-elect Trump and Elon Musk will do on government efficiency. It is terrifying people all around the world, but I think that it's going to be absolutely brilliant. The Conservative Party forgot what the state's purpose is in national life. No longer asking what it should or should not do, the state expanded and taxes went up. Instead, we use state power to continue tinkering with every aspect of life in order to achieve social justice. And if we keep doing that, we will sleepwalk into a planned economy far more oppressive than thinkers in the 20th century could ever have thought. The third thing we have to do is to stop being afraid to defend our beliefs. Let's stop being shamed into staying quiet. Part of the problem is that for the center-right, liberty has come to mean laissez-faire, that we should sit back and do nothing. We are told we must not take sides, not fight culture wars, that this is the operation of a free society, that this is progress. This is not progress. This do-nothing attitude is deeply misguided. Freedom must be protected and nurtured with reference to broader principles. Thank you. People should always be treated as individuals. Due process must always be ensured, and a limited state should operate in a neutral fashion to everyone in society, and the rule of law must be protected, under which all are equal. We cannot reverse time, but we can build a new future, and this requires a philosophy that is strong and confident in itself, and not overly fixated on the past. I'm not talking too much about the past today. I want to talk about the future, because we have to make a case for what we are for, not just what we are against, and not just about how things used to be. If we talk about what we are against all the time, we create new opponents, but very few, if any, new allies. A positive alternative is needed, not just harking back to nostalgia. And this project also requires the case to be made for that leaner government that stops the unnecessary growth of the state I just described, and that growth of the state is what has been creating those multiple opportunities for activists to spread left-wing ideology. But too much rhetoric speaks of a smaller state as an end in itself. It is more than that. A smaller state is a means to secure a better way of doing things, allowing bureaucracy to focus and prioritize its resources. The best governments do a few things well and not many things badly. So in conclusion, we can look at what is happening around the world. Arguments over pronouns and gender-neutral toilets or statues and white privilege may seem trivial when compared to solving climate change and the demographic time bomb of an aging population. But they are linked. You can't ask the rest of the world to make sacrifices to achieve net zero if you've just told them that Western civilization prospered by exploitation. Why should they trust you? Why should they trust you on anything from technology to vaccines and public health? If the West is only prosperous due to slavery and colonialism, if all of its success is down to the patriarchy and white supremacy and heteronormative oppression, there is a price to be paid. And that price is that our beliefs, democracy, equality before the law, meritocracy, free markets, are fiction. Fairy tales we tell ourselves to cover up a dark and murky past. There can be no resolution of the big problems of our age if we lose confidence in our history and the story of Western civilization. And if we fail to defend it, there are many competitor states who will happily watch as we undermine ourselves before they take over. So as I conclude, I apologize for ending on a morbid note, but I want to share a personal story of what happens when we don't defend the things we believe in, when we fail to give hope to the young. A vacuum is created, and other beliefs fill this vacuum. 2 years ago, this month, almost to the day, my cousin, who was living in Canada, killed himself. He was 27 years old, and he had fallen down the social media and internet rabbit hole of anti-natalism and pro-mortalism, left-wing movements I'd never even heard of. He had spent months, we found out, probably years, reading and self-radicalizing, learning about how human beings were a plague on the world, that our very existence was destroying the planet. These movements promoted the idea that having children was wrong, evil even, that ending your life was a better way to stop the spread of misery around the world. And it was heartbreaking to know that these ideas had filled his mind and tortured him. He is, or was, one of a generation of young people that see nothing ahead of them but a bleak future and no hope. I worry that when we do not promote what we believe, when we don't talk about it enough, things that matter, things that make life worth living, the importance of family, personal responsibility, how our beliefs and how our ideas are a force for good around the world, we fail to offer hope to the next generation. It is our job to provide hope. There is no cavalry coming, it is just us. We have a job to do in championing and defending values that don't just help to win elections, but make the world a better place. Thank you.
Wow. All right, so that's Kemi Badenoch, the new leader of the Conservative Party in the United Kingdom. Did you guys see any red flags in that 24-minute speech? That's the third time that I've watched that speech today. And the first time I picked up one red flag, and that was when she said she wasn't religious. And I went, All right, well, I can let that one slide because I've only just recently found God in the past year and a half, 2 years. But then She suggested that Russia was making an imperialistic move on Ukraine about halfway through the speech. I just noticed that now. And I thought, so she wants the war in Ukraine to continue. And it sounded like, because she got an ovation at that moment of her speech, it sounded like all of the other conservatives in that room did as well. Do I have to go back to George Bush? A new world order. And lastly, she said, how are we expected to solve climate change? What? What is she talking about? Actually, that's not even lastly. The last one was when she talked about her cousin dying in Canada, committing suicide because he went down some deep, dark rabbit hole with some far left darkness. Is she possibly suggesting that censorship does need to happen? Just in the reverse, instead of censoring right-wing voices, you censor left-wing voices? Because the Conservative Party of Canada's got a plan for censorship. It's a different version. It's a different version of Bill C-63. And that, by the way, is spearheaded by Garner. What's her name from Calgary? I can't remember her name, the blonde. Michelle Rempel Garner. She's the one with the plan. Well, we've got a better version of Bill C-63. No, we don't need any version of Bill C-63. By the way, there's people who have been talking about it online the past couple of days, and they're saying, oh, it's at second reading. It's got a chance to pass. It doesn't have a chance to pass. The only chance it may have to pass is if somehow Trudeau wins the next election. Now, getting back to that for a second. Why has Trudeau been hanging on so desperately these past few months? And sing along with him. Can anybody answer that? And by the way, go ahead and write down what you thought of that speech yourself, guys. I want to read in the comments. I'm not going to be able to do it now, obviously, but I will have a look later on. Wallace says, I see a sugar-coated globalist. Yeah, maybe. Maybe. She does speak our language somewhat, though. But remember, the big families control both pillars. They control the communists. They control what do they call them? The Zionists. Some people call them the Zionists. So two different cabals. We control them both. Which one do you want? Do you want to go back to the cabal you always known? Or do you want to try the new cabal of totalitarian dictatorships? No freedom, no nothing. Just go back to live back in the old cabal. At least you could have the illusion of liberty, right? Pensions, because he's a narcissist. We don't need any Bill C-63. No, we don't. Climate change is not our language. That's absolutely right, Eddie. It's not. Denise says, I picked the same issues as you, Shadow. Yeah, I mean, those are non-starters for me. So who knows? Maybe she'll see the light, and maybe there were some people in that conference that she met this past weekend who said, I want to talk to you, Kemi. Let's have a discussion here. Because any conservative that goes ahead and starts talking about solving climate change is somebody I just can't bring myself to vote for. And Pierre Poilievre here in Canada has been very unclear on his position. I'm sure it's going to become more clear as time goes on. With the election coming up, the campaign's going to start, and definitely that's going to be one of the issues, obviously. And all Poilievre has said about it so far is, well, we'll work on the filtration systems in Alberta and Saskatchewan, and we're going to get rid of the carbon tax. So what's he going to do about it? How is he going to do this? And is he going to promise something and never deliver on it? I don't know. But he's never been specific about climate change. And I'm maybe years ago, but I don't recall ever seeing that. I don't think any of them. This is a toughie, because it sounded like Kemi there believed 100% that it exists and we need to solve it, but we need to do it in a different way. Have you guys ever, if you have, please send me video of Pierre acknowledging that climate change exists and we must work to get to net zero. All right. One more thing government-wise. I'm going to stay on a little bit later tonight, you guys, because I do have a few things I want to get out, and I did want to play that entire speech for you just so you could hear the same thing I did. I'm thinking that maybe as time goes on, because remember, she just became the conservative leader in the UK. As time goes on, she'll definitely harden on some of the things that she brought up in that. But the 4 points, not religious, called Russia imperialist, which means she's for the war in Ukraine, climate change, and the disinformation thing. I didn't like any of that stuff. I do not. But she talked about smaller government, getting out of the way of people, letting them live their lives. But she wasn't really specific, was she? It was more of a theoretical conversation. Anyway, one more thing regarding government. That's Chrystia Freeland addressing reporters today. She's going to do the fall fiscal update on Monday. That's going to be what, the 14th, 15th, 16th, December 16th. Not very fall, is it? I suppose technically it's still autumn. Winter doesn't kick in until December the 20th or 21st, right? Better late than never. So here's Chrystia Freeland not answering reporters' questions.
I just want to make sure I understood what you said at the opening. So you talked about the debt to GDP ratio, but part of that fiscal anchor as well was keeping the deficit last year at or below 40.1 billion. And as you know, the PBO and many economists we've talked to believe that you exceeded that when we see the final numbers. Did you say that you expect you will hit that point of the fiscal anchor as well, that last year's deficit was at or below 40.1?
Our fiscal anchor is the debt to GDP ratio and a declining debt to GDP ratio. And that is so critical because that is really a way of saying our public finances are sustainable. If your debt is declining as a share of the economy, by definition, your fiscal position is sustainable, and that is really important. I expect that when I table the numbers on Monday, I will show that the debt to GDP ratio, which we forecast in the 2024 budget for the 23-24 fiscal year, will be met.
8 quarters so far with decline in growth. Not increase, decline. That's called a recession. And she also promised earlier this year that the deficit for this year would go no higher than $40 billion. Already, it's been leaked by some people that it's going to be closer to $60 billion. Let's go back to the UK for just a second and read this young lady's story here. I found it interesting. I found some video from GB News today, and I thought, I've got to find the story that tells me more about her. Her name is Connie Shaw, and she says, I'm in my final year as an undergraduate student in philosophy at the University of Leeds. I am a gender-critical feminist. That is, I believe that women are adult human females, and that this is the basis of their oppression. I do not believe in the concept of gender at all. In the words of Germaine Greer, femininity is the fake version of femaleness. Accordingly, I view transgenderism as one of the biggest threats to women's sex-based rights in the Western world. I joined Leeds Student Radio in February of 2024. I was a presenter on Politics Hour for one episode of which we interviewed Susan Smith, the director of For Women Scotland, a grassroots campaign that strives to protect women's sex-based rights. I found myself agreeing with her entirely and decided I wanted to write my dissertation on why the concept of gender identity was a threat to sex-based rights. I also became obsessed with radio, spending more time in the studio and prepping for shows than I did on my university work. Hang on, let me just make sure I scroll down properly here and don't completely erase this page. That's better. I was elected as daytime editor for the following year, where I would oversee Politics Hour, Women's Hour, and LGBTQ Hour. Simultaneously, I was preparing for my undergraduate thesis. After discovering the works of Kathleen Stock and Helen Joyce over the summer break, I became even more invested in the issue. I was also aghast at Tickle v. Giggle, an improbably named case in Australia in which a trans-identified male, Tickle, sued a woman-only app called Giggle for Girls. The court found that Tickle had been discriminated against on the basis of his female gender identity, declaring that it was possible to change sex. I couldn't believe that a westernized, liberal, secular country could so blatantly remove the sex-based rights of women. I decided I would not stay quiet anymore. I took to posting on X and starting my own podcast separate from Lead Student Radio. I interviewed Charlie Bentley Astor, a writer and detransitioner, to talk about her experience with gender ideology. The episode received a lot of criticism from students. It was denounced as far-right, transphobic, and contributing to hate crime. Some said the existence of the podcast was unjustifiable. In October, Lead Student Radio had press passes for the Battle of Ideas, a freedom of speech festival, as a result of my existing connections with the organizers. We promoted the event, and as a team, we secured multiple interviews with various commentators. I did an interview with Graham Lynchen, a TV writer, which was released October 28th. I also wrote an article for Lynchen's Substack, which was published the following day. There, I described the climate on campus at the University of Leeds, the way gender ideology is pushed, and how students are given no choice but to comply. I explained the backlash I'd received to the episode with Charlie and how I'd not been given the choice as to whether my pronouns were displayed next to my name on the Lead Student Radio Committee display wall. On October 30th, I was informed by the student union that I'd been suspended from Lead Student Radio for allegedly breaking the code of conduct and that I was under investigation. Here's Connie Shaw on GB News.
Yes, they said that if I want to run for committee again, I can only do this if I provide a written apology to the wider membership and take mandatory training.
Mandatory training in what?
Online conduct.
Online conduct. And what sort of form would an apology take for, I'm very, very sorry for stating known biological fact?
Well, it turns out that the basis on which I've been suspended is because I've brought LSR into disrepute, but I'm not sure how I've done that. By stating facts? Yes, it would seem that way. So I'm not sure what I'd be apologising for.
I mean, we spoke to Brendan O'Neill from Spiked Online about this. He's written so much about what's the madness of what's going on our campuses. And he said, you know, I mean, this is, you know, it's Kafkaesque, it's Orwellian. I mean, these words we throw around now, but it really is. You've committed a thought crime, is what's happened. You've committed a thought crime. You refuse to play along with something that you know is not true. Do you walk around feeling anger, hatred or fear of people who believe they're born in the wrong body?
Absolutely not.
Do you harangue those people, abuse those people, tackle them?
No, but obviously the term transphobia is so broad now that it even applies to just stating the fact that your sex is your sex and that can't be changed. Of course, I feel empathy or at least sympathy towards people with gender dysphoria.
Would you ever, to get back on the radio, to get back into it, would you ever agree to apologise?
No.
Why not?
Because I don't know.
I'm not saying you should. I actively don't want you to.
I don't know what I'd be apologising for. I'd find it very hard to even start writing that letter.
Yeah. Now, I'm not a real big believer in feminism either. You know what? There's way too much fighting between men and women. And I'm not... I'm not talking about married couples or longtime couples either, just bickering. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about women can do anything that men can do. Yeah, probably. Some things, not as well. But you know what I'm saying here. We both play our roles the way God designed us to be. We both play our roles in our relationships. That's pretty much it. And yeah, there are some men who are more feminine and some women who are more masculine. But generally speaking, that's the exception that proves the rule. That old expression, the exception that proves the rule, right? Man or men. Some guys go too far. And you want to know how that's policed? Because we've heard all about toxic masculinity for these past few years now. You want to know how that's policed? I could tell you guys a story I'm not going to tell you because it's really rough. But it's policed by other guys. If some guy starts chirping too much, now, again, there are exceptions to this, depending on the culture you come from, I would say. But generally speaking, if a guy gets too far out of control, the other guys in that pack are going to make sure that he doesn't do that again, by hook or by crook. That's a guarantee. There's a code amongst men. All the men I've known. And I'm going to be 60 years old in a few days. And that code states you go too far, you're going to get it. And it's going to be delivered by more than one of us. That's just the way it goes. Now, sometimes these guys act alone. And that's when the problems start. That's when we get all the sex crimes out there. And yeah, I know it can be rough, but don't blame that on toxic masculinity, because in the actual world that I've experienced my entire life, men police men. It's like hockey, really. You know, you try and take fighting out of the game. I'm sorry, that just doesn't work. Emotions get really high, and you got to just punch a guy in the face. Sometimes, yeah, and come what may after that, maybe it's a bench clearing brawl, but that's the kind of stuff that happens when people get heated. But you got to be able to take it out. If you can't take it out, it's going to leak into other areas. Things generally work out the way they should until other people, possibly governments or cultural action movements, try to insert themselves. And that's when we wind up with problems. No more bullying. Say no to bullying. All right, well, bullying's only been around since mankind has been on Earth. That's just the way it is. You sink or swim in the environment. Survival of the fittest. I'm sorry, we are animals, and that's how we've dealt with things for years. But now you can't bully. You can't do anything. Well, what is that going to make the kid who was going to be bullied when he's grown up? Soft. He's never going to learn as a child that if I got bullied probably for a reason. Probably. There's usually a reason. All the movies make sure to let you know that there's never a reason. It's just random, but it's not. There's always a reason. I'm not saying it's a good reason, but I'm saying there's always a reason. So the kid gets the snot kicked out of him for a couple of weeks until he learns to fight back. And hopefully you learn that at the age of 11 or 12 years old so you can take that lesson with you into your adulthood. But now these kids who have never been bullied are going to go out in the real world when things go back to normal, and they are, because we're winning. And they're going to get the shit kicked out of them. Sorry for my language. Now, look at these spoiled brats here. I used to like Lush, and I knew it was woke. I haven't been to Lush in years and years and years. A buddy of mine introduced me to Lush, you know, the company that makes soap and scents and fragrances and bath bombs and all of that stuff. He introduced me to them. I think they were in Banff, and he lived in Calgary. So he sent me some of this stuff in the mail like 25 years ago. I went, what's this? This is before they expanded. And I went, wow, that smells really good. Thanks, man, for sending me that stuff. And now they're everywhere. Lush is everywhere, right? And it's woke. So what happens today or maybe yesterday in New York City? E.L. Jacoby on X says, Lush Cosmetics employees in New York City went outside the store to yell, "Kiss my ass," and biatch at Jewish parents who were marching against anti-Semitism. I looked and looked and looked, and maybe it's happened in the past hour and a half or so, but these kids who went out there to yell at these Jewish parents, at least as far as I've seen, have not yet been fired. Lush continues to prove that it's a company founded on anti-Semitism and hate. You want to see the video? I've got the video. Here's the video. All right, let's see what Brett has to say here. Heard some good things and perhaps some paranoia from you, Shadow. Well, you know what, Brent? I'm not going to disparage anybody here. Everybody's entitled to their opinion. Maybe you're right. Maybe you're right. Maybe I was a little bit paranoid about Kemi, but after the last 5 years, we really do have to watch things. And so obviously that's going to cause some paranoia from people. Yeah, but I understand your point. I don't want to be too nitpicky about things, but I mean, aside from the religious thing, and I think that was probably the most nitpicky of my 4 points, but definitely the Russia-Ukraine thing. I didn't like that at all. The climate change thing, definitely a huge issue. I mean, you know that is, Brent. You know that is. And then the mis and disinformation thing. And maybe I'm extrapolating on her statements. Maybe she didn't mean to put it like that. But she was talking about her cousin dying because he jumped down some deep, dark hole on social media and found some very, very dark left-wing stuff. So was she insinuating that we need some kind of censorship on social media to prevent that from happening? See, that's where I went with that. Anyway, Brent says, not siding herself with any religion makes her accepted by the greater population. Yeah, that's true. Non-secularism. Yet she clearly asserted she supported the culture and the history of the Christian forefathers. She clearly said she would not give way to any nonsense about white privilege and such. I don't think she believes in climate change, but like conservative leader, well, again, she did say, how do we solve climate change? Unless she was just using that as kind of an example or a euphemism or something. I don't know. But yeah, thank you for that comment. Very well thought out, Brent. Thank you very much for that. Family-friendly dance in Montreal canceled over race-based ticket pricing. Oh, man. I mean, sometimes you just go, I thought I'd seen everything, and now this. The story comes from True North. An annual family-friendly dance. They got to wreck everything, don't they? An annual family-friendly dance in Montreal was canceled on Sunday because organizers charged separate admission prices based on the attendees' race. The Sheikh La Cabane Fam Jam was scheduled to be held at La Cabane Community Center on Sunday. However, organizers decided to cancel the event following public outcry over ticket prices. Organizers were charging $25.83 for general admission, but only $15.18 for attendees who were Black, Indigenous, or people of color. Another pay structure for the dance included free entry for white children under the age of 2, with that same offer granted for Black and Indigenous children, but with the age being extended to 12. I used to despise the Parti Québécois and the Bloc. And maybe someday I will again. I don't know. But, everything that those guys are saying makes so much more sense these days. Parti Québécois leader Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon responded to news of the dance with a social media post saying, what all Quebecers want, no matter their skin color, is equal treatment without discrimination. That's exactly the opposite of what this organization is doing. The situation was first reported by La Presse Saturday, which Quebec-based human rights lawyer Julius Gray called a display of flagrant discrimination. Following news the event had been canceled, Gray told True North that this should serve as a wake-up call to others. This is a wake-up call to our society to be less concerned with communitarian goals and more with the intrinsic worth of each individual. Critics noted that race-based pricing is also likely a violation of the Quebec Charter of Human Rights and Freedoms under Section 10, which enshrines full and equal recognition and exercise of a person's human rights and freedoms without distinction, exclusion, or preference based on race. Well, that's better than the Canadian Charter, isn't it? We went through that last week. Dance organizers responded to the blowback in a social media post saying the BIPOC ticket type, now called equity price ticket. Equity, not equality. Remember, there's a very distinct difference. The equity price ticket was aimed at providing support for marginalized groups in our community. Well, we hold that true reparations are to be made by the entities that plundered in order to gain power. Micro-reparations in the name of solidarity, not charity, like these stand to gesture towards ways we can create more access while asking what other ways might we betray supremacies to best serve the collective. These people are so brainwashed. That's critical race theory right there. That's on the first page. Upon announcing the dance would be canceled, the group said that it was in response to receiving so much hate and misunderstanding. It's not hate. We've had it with this nonsense. We don't hate you, but we've had it. We've had it. And they're misunderstanding. No, we get exactly what you're doing. The sad truth, though, guys, is that these folks have been so brainwashed, they actually believe that what they're doing is the right thing to do. All right, before we leave tonight, we do have some scare tactics that are coming out I want you guys to be aware of. First of all, this was on several different left-wing corporate medias today. And yesterday, too, it came out on the weekend. The Arctic to lose its ice cover in 2027. Well, I guess everything else is pointless then. It's over. It's done. Run for high ground, everybody. That water's coming down. And it's going to be cold. You ever see that movie? What was the movie with the meteors? There was two meteor movies. There was one where the meteor came down, splashed into the ocean. That was the one with Robert Duvall, I think, and then caused a big tidal wave that went to Middle America almost. And Fredo, the Hobbit, was in it too. Anyway, that's what, if the Arctic ice melts, that's it. Arctic sea ice is melting at an unprecedented rate of more than 12% in each decade. According to a study published in Nature Communications, the first ice-free day in the Arctic Ocean could come in as little as 3 to 6 years. That is between 2027 and 2030. Consequences of melting ice. Climatologists note that the loss of... I'm not going to get into this. It's, again, come on. How many times have we heard this nonsense? Commonly prescribed drugs increase dementia risk, study finds. Well, maybe this isn't a scare tactic from Surrey Live. This is UK, not BC. Maybe this is saying, hey, people, wake the hell up. And, I was thinking earlier today, when we heard, QAnon, all those people 4 or 5 years ago saying, it's the Great Awakening. They made it sound like some kind of religious experience. It's not. It's just that we're starting to see more people with their eyes wide open these days, looking around. And so maybe, some people perceive it as paranoia, but it's not. We're just looking around going, hey, hold on. You're not being completely honest, are you? Are you? More people are very hypercritical of politicians than they used to be. Yeah, granted, there's still some that sit back and I don't care. Even though the government inserted themselves into our lives, told us we couldn't have people over for Christmas, told us we couldn't have people over for Easter, for Thanksgiving, told us we couldn't see our dying parents in their long-term care facilities. We had to say goodbye through glass. That's what the government did. That's only one of the things the government did. And people 3-4 years later, they tend to have forgotten that. It doesn't matter who gets in, they're all crooked. Yeah, it kind of does. It kind of does. And like I've been saying regarding conservative versus liberal, two wings of the same bird, people are saying, I say, yeah, sometimes in some cases, but not all cases. The conservatives will slow down this ridiculous ride into globalism. The liberals have got us on a breakneck train, baby. Full speed ahead. Woo woo! Justin Trudeau is the chief engineer on the Globalist Express, and he needs to go. With the extra time that we get, we the people are going to have to come up with something better. Like Kemi said, we need to come up with something better instead of complaining, bitching, and moaning all the time. But, this is also part of the process. It's the awakening process. And some of us are very, very frustrated these days with the fact that some people just don't seem to ever want to wake up, and Christmas is coming and I'm not invited again. Right? I'm certainly hoping that you've made new friends along the way. Some people who you never knew maybe 4 or 5 years ago, who are now as close to you as anybody's ever been, and you could never imagine life without them. That's one of the blessings of everything we've been through for the past several years now. But we do need to come up with something better at some point, solutions. And some people are working on those based locally. So we build from the ground up. We're not ruled from the top down. Anyway, the warnings about the drugs here, Big Pharma's got to go too. They got to go. Warnings have been issued over commonly prescribed drugs could increase risk of dementia. Following a scientific study, research suggested that regular use of certain types of commonly prescribed drugs used to treat bladder conditions, Parkinson's disease, and depression could significantly increase the risk of dementia in later life. Oh, interesting. Let's get back to the scare tactics. Parasite that eats animals and human hosts inside out threatens U.S. meats. That's from the USDA. Came out a couple days ago. What? There's a parasite that eats animals, including humans, from the inside out? Ugh. A danger to our food supply is lurking at the Mexico-U.S. border. A terrifying parasite. This is from the New York Post, man. A terrifying parasite that hasn't breached North America in over a century has reemerged in Mexico, the U.S. Department of Agriculture has warned. So this could be the food thing that everybody has been. You see? Am I being paranoid? I'm sorry, Brent. I don't mean that. I'm making fun. I'm only having a good time with you here. But come on. I mean, we knew that food scarcity was part of the plan. So is this what they're going to do? Health officials in Mexico alerted the U.S. about a recent infestation of New World screwworm in a cow from Chiapas during an inspection near the Guatemala border. So is this going to be one of those stories that just kind of goes away when people go, yeah, whatever? Or are they going to try it? Which one of the stories are they going to try and build out is what I want to know. Next pandemic psyop, maybe. Maybe this is it from Natural News. Potential spread of bleeding eye virus in Rwanda leads U.S. State Department to issue increased caution travel advisory. Jeez. Last story. Boy, this seems to happen a lot in that gay community, doesn't that trans community? Gay founders of Pink News accused of sexual misconduct by staffers. I'm not, there's always been sexual misconduct, Me Too, all that stuff, right? But, and there's still a lot of Diddy, come on. Jeffrey Epstein, all those clowns, they all need to be found out and arrested as well. But this does seem to happen a little bit more in this community. The owners who run the Pink News, and that's their big publication too. They've got their own everything. It's the world's largest queer and trans news site, have been accused by more than 30 current and former staffers of sexual misconduct, predatory behavior, and bullying in the workplace. This includes numerous allegations of inappropriate sexual behavior towards younger male employees who were too intoxicated to consent. Lawyers for Anthony James and Benjamin Cohen, the gay couple who founded Pink News, have denied the allegations. Of course, you're innocent until you're proven guilty, right? Several employees came forward to the BBC, to the BBC about the alleged abuse they endured at the hands of James and Cohen while working at the woke UK LGBTQ news company. All right, tonight in the extension, we haven't delved into this. I ran across this guy for the first time about 3-4 years ago. He was abducted by aliens. Stephen Greer is renowned for his dedication to disclosing classified UFO and extraterrestrial information over the past 30 years. He has briefed senior government officials worldwide, conducted hundreds of interviews, press conferences, and lectures. As the author of 5 books and the producer of documentaries seen by millions, he continues to educate people on peaceful contact with interstellar civilizations, the world of UFOs and UAPs, CE5 contact protocols, meditation techniques, and the transformative power of free energy. He's got some interesting stuff to say. And you want to know what else? He is totally clued in to what's going on our planet right now. And he's got some solutions. But People gotta believe, man. People gotta believe. It's very interesting stuff. We've got a couple of 15-minute segments, 15-minute lectures he gave. We're going to play in the extension tonight. If you're an All Access member on shadowdavis.com, I'll see you there in a couple of minutes. Don't forget, Ted Coons from from Vaccine Choice Canada. He's the president of Vaccine Choice Canada. He's coming on the show Thursday night, and then Karen Kingston joins the show next Wednesday night. The extension starts in 2 minutes for All Access on shadowdavis.com. I'll see you there. If not, hopefully you're coming. Hopefully you're going to buy yourself a membership. Even if you never use it, remember that you are still supporting the Shadow Davis Show, the Shadow at Night live stream, and I truly, truly appreciate it. Thank you very, very much for that in advance. We'll see you there in the extension in 2 minutes. And if not, I'll catch you tomorrow night at 8 o'clock for another Shadow at Night live stream. I love you all. I appreciate you all. And I will talk to you soon. Bye for now.